Pour démarrer cette session, on va passer en anglais. Ils vont passer en anglais. Let's switch to English for the following keynote. The Age of Uncertainty, Strategic Planning Using AI, to talk about this big topic. I'm glad to welcome on stage Johanna Dumont, VP Strategy, Insights and Innovation, Danone, and Maurice Ndiaye, founder and CEO of the Stratec, Descartes and Moss. Please, you're welcome on stage.
Okay, that's not fair. The music is on and the timer is on at the same time. So hi everyone, and thanks for being here today. So we're really excited to walk you through, I think, a new field of application of AI that we don't hear about a lot. This is what we came up with, this concept of Stratec. So how do you use AI to develop better strategies in a very volatile world? I'm going to walk you through just a very classic slide that you've seen a lot. The world is VUCA, volatile, uncertain, complex, ambiguous, meaning that everything is unpredictable, and the mere pace of innovation and disruption from any point of view is accelerating in a very, very impressive way, as you can see in the chart. In the past 3 years, we've had health problems, economic failure and bank failure, inflation, technological disruption, and it all happens very fast-paced. The problem when you're a company and when you are planning on your investments and looking in the long term is that you still need to make some decisions as to where are you going to allocate sometimes billions of dollars for the future. That can be in HR, that can be in manufacturing capacity, that can be in M&A, that can be in branding, of course, and that can also be in R&D altogether.
Yeah, and if you think about, from my perspective, from a Danone perspective, this number is quite staggering. 2 billion is what we are investing literally today on things that are going to impact our business, not just today, but also for the longer term. So in this context of high volatility, and who knows what's going to be next, the cost of bad decisions can be really huge for us. So we're looking to how can we turn that uncertainty from this, pain of not kind of knowing what to do into some type of competitive advantage.
Yes, and when you look, so imagine you can just improve the performance of your allocation by 10% or even 1%. If you're talking about billions, that's already a lot of money. And you can do a lot of other things with that money. So the problem is, what are the solutions that you have today? If you're going to look at how can I create my investment plan, again, that can be anything from training to R&D to creating a new plant. Well, you have to go through consulting. Usually, this is what you call the McKinseys, you call the Kantars, and it takes some time. It's very hard to update. It's usually quite expensive. Well, in a word, it just does not scale. And when you are facing disruptions every quarter, it's just basically making your job just impossible.
So I want to take you back to a period of time just a couple of years ago, at the beginning of the COVID pandemic. And this was a period of time, probably the most uncertain and most volatile and scary time for all of us back then. What we were faced with was, a degree of, challenge in an organization. What do we do with this? And we were bombarded with information, great information. I'm sure that you can all relate to the fact that we were getting reports and presentations and data from sources that, usually we would pay lots of money for. Everything was coming to us for free, but not just to me, coming to everybody. And all of this data was leading us to the idea that just having more data actually wasn't the answer to our problems. This kind of bloat just made us feel overwhelmed. We didn't know what to do with it. And because of that, the questions that were coming to us were more challenging and deeper than we have ever experienced. From my standpoint, from working at Insights for the last 25 years, this was a time when we were in the spotlight and people wanted answers to questions that they had never approached us with before. So with all of that, our stakeholders were essentially panicked. Right, they were running around. I mean, I know it's maybe hard to remember, but 2 years ago, it was panic for all of us. We really did not know which way to go, what to do, and where to turn.
I think there's something very similar happening now with ChatGPT. If you look at people like 300 million of jobs are going to be destroyed overnight almost, and everyone is starting to say, well, what should I do? And should I, is my job going to be replaced? It's even bigger because it's students are afraid also themselves. So, but it's the same kind of disruption. And again, looking backwards, there's been a lot of major global events that have been impacting every department of the company in the past 3 years. And it's very likely, I don't want to scare you guys, but it's very likely to be the new normal. So the new normal is no normal, basically.
But when this happened, I was like literally in my kitchen cooking another meal for my family, and Maurice called me on the phone and he said, the stuff that we've been talking about of using AI to answer some bigger problems, I think we might have an idea that might work for you. And what I was looking at, what I was trying to unpack was what was really happening with COVID. Like, we knew that there was a pandemic and people were getting sick and people were dying and it was happening all around the world. That was a given. But what was really happening? How could we manage our business through the pandemic in a way that leaves us stronger at the end of it than we were before? And so this is the process that we went through, was to help with Maurice's help to try and unpack this challenge and figure out the real drivers behind it so we could act appropriately. So what did we do?
Yeah, a little bit of tech here. So I'm going to introduce a few concepts. Hopefully I'm not going to lose you. But the idea that we're trying to work around is this idea of systemic modeling. So when you think about the way a lot of decisions have been made, are made in peaceful times, you're focusing on one dimension. Let's say the consumer. So customer centricity, for example, is very much focused on the consumer. But if you think about it, there's a lot of things that don't come from the consumer. They can come from the industry, they can come from the regulation, GDPR, for example, the industry, the metaverse. This did not come from the consumer. Or if you think about, those are the very easy examples. So when you're thinking about the long-term future, I think one-dimensional analysis is working well when you're looking at prediction in the short term. So you want to predict for your sales in a very closed environment, and everything else beyond that is stable. When you're looking longer term, you have to take into account a much wider range of parameters and drivers that may impact your business. So what we've developed is this concept of systemic modeling. So basically, we have two things. The first is we are describing your company and what is it that you're doing with a mathematical object. It's like a huge matrix that is across 7 dimensions, that describes your suppliers, your skills, your tech, your channels of distribution, what is it you're selling, your brand, and your customers. So this is a vector or matrix of attributes, but I'll stop there for that part. And with that object, so imagine like a sphere or a matrix again, we're going to look at everything that can impact this using this pastel framework, so political, economical, societal, technological, and legal. So I'm not going to go into the details today, but just imagine that we have access to a lot of sources about all that, and then we're trying to play with this and to say, okay, so how are all those drivers going to influence part or all of the parts of my company now and in the future? So what it looks like is this. This is what we call a spaghetti bowl. So here you have a platform, and within the platform, there's a representation of all the links. So at this stage, there's nothing you can do with this, obviously. It's really not actionable at all. It's just to show you that there's some underlying data processing. And imagine SimCity, for example. So what is it that we're trying to do is a real simulation of how is your market going to evolve in the future, playing on different assumptions and different scenarios. So using AI, and identify what is the most likely and what will be the impact on your company. And then going backwards from there, you can make some more confident decisions on what should I go next to be prepared for the future.
So this is all very interesting because you'll notice that the top of the list was concern about safety and security. Now, when we were doing this work, it was April, so we were roughly 6 weeks into the pandemic, about 2 weeks into lockdown. So we were processing data at a very, very early stage of the pandemic to try and understand how we needed to act. Now, that now seems very obvious to you all, but at the time, this was a health crisis, nothing more, right? But what we learnt was, first and foremost, COVID was a safety and security crisis, meaning that people were scared, not just about getting sick, but they were scared about their long-term future, their jobs, their friends, their relationships, their housing. They were scared about everything. And so by understanding that, we were able to then translate that into a way for our brands to communicate with our consumers. So we built a North Star, we like to call it, for our brands to navigate through the crisis. And that really meant that we built this model we called Serve and Solve. So our idea was that all of the things that we were doing, that we would do it as a brand, but also as a company, would serve the consumer at the time when they really needed the support from us. So building trust, making our products essential to them, making them accessible, focusing on the supply chain and reassuring them that the products that they love are going to be on the shelves tomorrow when they need them. Promoting solidarity, making sure that we were part of the communities that we serve and serving the suppliers and the farmers and everybody, and making sure that we were all together, and looking to our employees and making sure that our employees felt reassured of their jobs, and we were very public as a company in doing that. So all of this led us to feeling very confident in the direction that we were taking in order to survive and to thrive throughout the pandemic.
Yeah, and I think what's relevant is that this is still on. I mean, this is still the brand platform that is used by Danone, and this is a very good example of before and after COVID in terms of the impact in the communication campaigns. And just going backwards on the underlying structure of the five branch star, each branch is actually associated to a node that we've identified across the data at the intersection of consumer behaviors, suppliers' behaviors, competitive landscape, all of the different data sources from all the dimensions that I mentioned earlier. We're combining that to identify what we call shifts that are like major areas of transformation that can impact the business. And if you remember the past slide, it was the North Star is directly derived from the 5 shifts. Now, yeah, sorry.
So so that's great. But what have we done? What have you done for us lately?
Yeah, going to another example, because we've been working together since then, since it was so great. And you came up to me with another challenge, which I think was even more interesting. About so now what about 2030? We have a portfolio. We have 4 divisions at the time. Now 3. 3 divisions at the time. Now 4. And we want to figure out how do we manage our R&D investments in the long term. So those are big decisions, because we're talking about allocating huge amounts of resources and developing products that will be on the market in 2030. So there's very long R&D cycles, big money. And again, in a very wide area range of opportunities. Is that correct? Yeah?
I think that's correct, yes.
Good. So 2 slides left, and we're on time. So that's another example. So here, that's just a very simplified example of this simulation platform, where basically you have a matrix, and we're looking at 3 dimensions. One is timeline. So we're trying to assess how early is a phenomenon going to happen in the time. So again, we're talking long-term here. So it's not just sales prediction based on the weather. This is way more complex because it's long-term, so you have tons of parameters. The other axis is probability. So predictive analysis is usually pretty accurate, but when you're in the long term, you have to be aware that you have a much wider range, you have a cone actually of possible futures. So we're trying to assess the likelihood of something to happen. And the third one, the size of the bubble, is the impact. So based on what is it that you're doing today, what is going to impact me and by when? So it gives you, then you have this, and then we're playing with different assumptions, like high inflation, aging population, climate crisis. And we're stress testing your company and say, well, across those scenarios, this is the most likely to happen, and it will impact you no matter what, so you should invest your money there. So it's building confidence for the C-suite so that they have clarity on what are their priorities in allocating resources across all the departments. Yeah.
And I think what's super exciting about this now is that you can start to see the work that we've done transforming into real actions within the company. Now, these are future focused and these are things that we're starting to talk about, but really within our R&D community, we are, focused on areas directly coming from the framework that we built. Things about, the gut microbiome and other sorts of technologies which, I can't talk about today, but which we know are going to significantly impact our business in the way that, the plant-based category has impacted our dairy business over the past 10 years. We know that there are more big shifts coming for us, but we also know there are a lot of little things that we still need to take care of, which, this is helping us to kind of put more of a laser focus on the things that we know are really going to matter for us.
And I think we're over time now, so anyway, we had one last slide, but we're done. Happy to connect. We'll be off stage there if you want to continue the conversation. Thanks for listening.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, guys, for sharing those insights.